Karina, baby, I love you more than anything in this entire world. You know that? It is the morning time. It's actually very late. It's 1:31 in the morning. It's actually 1:33 in the morning, and it is the 27th of October. Now, I'm going to be reading you the 26th because it was the 26th yesterday. I got to go out shopping today for some Halloween undergarments with Riley, so I wasn't home to read you storybooks during the day, so I'm reading storybooks right now. Alright, so 3 Out Walking is for the 26th. When Hamish McGregor and I go out, Titus, my cat, comes too. We walk in a line. He complains all the time, the way that some cats do. Hamish McGregor keeps stopping to sniff, tracking the scent of a beast, wagging his tail. He's hot on the trail of a lion or a beetle at least. Hamish McGregor is always behind. Titus likes straddling ahead. And hey diddle diddle, I'm in the middle, taking them home to be fed. Oh, look at that. Hamish McGregor is a puppy dog, and Titus the cat. Look at the puppy. Oh, look at how cute, right? He gets to go for a walk. So 3 Out Walking, that was adorable. As far as the no such ghost. Today is 3 Out Walking. Alright, let's see what our next storybook is in our fairy tale book. Yesterday was The Colony of Cats. Ooh, Sinbad and the Sailor. Alright, this looks like this is broken down into a couple books for Sinbad and the Sailor. Because there's Voyage 1, First Voyage, Second Voyage. Oh, is this the last book? There's no way this is the last book. Alright, so this is a long book, and this is actually our last book. This is actually our last book in this book, baby. Oh my gosh. So this is how long the book is. It's pretty long. So we're probably going to break it down to a couple sections, because it's 1:36 right now in the morning. So, in the times of Caliph Haron and Rashid, there lived in Baghdad a poor porter named Sinbad, who on a very hot day was sent to carry a heavy load from one end of the city to the other. Before he had accomplished half his distance, he was so tired that finding himself in a quiet street where the pavement was sparkling with rose water and a cool breeze was blowing, he set his burden upon the ground and sat down to rest in the shade of a grand palace. Very soon he decided he could not have chosen a pleasanter place. A delicious perfume of aloes, woods, and pastels came from the open window and mingled with the scent of the rose water which streamed up from the hot pavement. Within the palace he heard music as of many instruments cunningly played, and the melodies wabbled of nightingales and other birds. And by this and the appetizing smell of many dainty dishes, he judged that feasting and merrymaking were going on. He wondered who lived in the magnificent palace. he had never seen before. The street in which it stood, being one which he seldom had occasion to pass, to satisfy his curiosity, he went up to one of the splendidly dressed servants who stood outside the door, and asked the name of the master of the mansion. What replied he? Do you live in Baghdad, and not know that here lives Sinbad the sailor, the famous traveler who has sailed over even sea upon which the sun shines? Over every sea upon which the sun shines. The porter could not help feeling envious of one whose lot seemed to be as happy as his own was miserable. Casting his eyes up to the sky, he explained aloud, "Consider, mighty creature of all things, the difference between Sinbad's life and mine. Every day I suffer 1,000 hardships and misfortunes, and have hard work to get even enough barley bread to keep myself and my family alive, while the lucky Sinbad spends money right and left and lives upon the fat of the land. What he has done, that you should give him this pleasant life. What have I done to deserve so hard a fate?" Saying this, he stomped upon the ground like one beside himself with misery and despair. Just at this moment a servant came out of the palace, and taking him by the arm said, "Come with me, the noble Sinbad, my master, wishes to speak with you." Sinbad was not a little surprised at the summons, and feared that his ungrounded words might have been drawn up upon him the displeasure of Sinbad, and he tried to excuse himself upon the pretext that he could not leave the burden which he has been entrusted to keep in the streets. However, the lackey promised him it should be taken care of, and urged him to obey the call so pressingly that at last the porter was obliged to yield. He followed the servant into the vast room, where a great company was seated upon a table covered with all sorts of delicacies. In the place of honor sat a tall, grave man, whose long white beard gave him a venerable air. Behind his chair stood a crowd of attendants, ready to minister to his wants. This was the famous Sinbad himself. Sinbad, making a sign to him to approach, caused him to be seated, and heaped many choice morsels upon his plate. Presently, when the banquet drew to a close, he addressed the noble company and the humble porter. "Since you have perhaps heard but confused accounts of my 7 voyages, and the dangers and wonders that I have met by sea and land, I will now give you a full and true account of them, which I think you will be well pleased to hear." As Sinbad was relaying his adventures, chiefly on account of the porter, he ordered, before beginning his tale, that the burden which he had left in the street should be carried by some of his own servants to the place for which Sinbad had set out at first, while he remained to listen to his story. First voyage. I inherited considerable wealth from my parents, and being young and foolish, I squandered it recklessly upon every kind of pleasure. But before long, finding that the riches speedily took to themselves wings if managed as badly as I was managing mine, and remembering also that to be old and poor is miserable indeed, I began to think of how I could make the best of what still remained to me. I sold all my household goods by public auction, joined a company of merchants who traded by sea, and embarked with them to Belshora in a ship which we had fitted out among us ourselves. We set sail and took our course toward the East Indies by the Persian Gulf, having the coast of Persia upon our left hand, and upon our right the shores of Arabia Felix. I was the first much troubled by the uneasy motion of the vessel, but speedily recovered my health, and since that hour have been no more plagued by sickness. From time to time we landed in various islands, which we sold or exchanged our merchandises, and one day when the wind dropped suddenly we found ourselves becalmed close to a small island which rose only slightly above the surface of the water. Our sails were forelowed, and the captain gave all who whistled permission to land for a while and amuse themselves. I was among the number, but when after strolling about for some time we lit a fire and sat down to enjoy our respite, we were startled by a sudden and violent trembling of the island. At the same moment, those left upon the ship set up an outcry, begging us come on board for our lives, since we had taken from the island with nothing but the back of our sleeping whale. Oh, the island was nothing but the back of a sleeping whale. Those who were nearest to the boat jumped into it. Others leaped into the sea, but before I could save myself, the whale plunged suddenly into the depths of the ocean, leaving me clinging to a piece of wood which had brought to make our fire. Meanwhile, a breeze had sprung up, and in the confusion of hoisting the sails and collecting those who were near to the boat and clinging to the sides, no one missed me, and I was left at the mercy of the waves. All that day I floated, now beaten this way, now that, and when night fell, I despaired for my life. But weary and spent as I was, I clung to my frail support, and great was my joy when the morning light shone that I had drifted amongst an island. The cliffs were high and steep, but luckily for me some trees' roots protruded in places, and by their aid I climbed up at last and stretched myself upon the turf at the top, when I lay more dead than alive, till the sun was high on the heavens. By that time I was very hungry, and after some searching I came upon edible herbs and a spring of clear water, and much refreshed, I sat out to explore the island. Presently I reached a great plain, where a grazing horse was tethered, and as I stood looking at it, I heard voices talking, apparently underground. In a moment a man appeared who asked me how I had come to be on this island. I told him my adventure, and heard in return that he was one of the grooms of Myrid, the king of the island, and that each year they came to feed their master's horses on this plain. He took me to a cave where his companions were assembled. When I had eaten the food they set before me, they bade me think myself fortunate to have come upon them when I did, since they were going back to their master, the king, on the following day, and without their aid I could certainly never have found my way alone to the inhabited part of the island. Early the next morning we accordingly set out, and when we reached the capital, I was graciously received by the king, to whom I related my adventure. He ordered that I should be well cared for and provided with such things as I needed. The capital was standard upon the seashore, and was visited by vessels from all parts of the world. Being a merchant, I sought out men of my own profession, partially those who came from foreign countries, and I hoped in this way to hear any news from Baghdad, and found some means of returning there. In the meantime, I heard many curious things and answered many questions concerning my own country, for I talked with everyone who came to me. Also, to while away the time of waiting, I explored the little islands named Cassia, which belonged to King Merid, and was supposed to be inhabited by the spirit named Draggle. Indeed, the sailors assured me that often at night the playing of the timbrels could be heard upon it. However, I saw nothing strange on my voyage, saving some fish that were a full 300 feet long, but were fortunately even more in dread of us than we were of them, and fled from us if we did but strike upon a board to frighten them. Other fishes, there were only a cubit long, and these had heads like owls. One day down in the quarry, I saw a ship, which had just cast anchor and was discharging its cargo. When the merchants of whom it belonged were busily decorating the removal of their warehouses drawing nearer, I presently noticed that my own name was marked upon some of the packages, and after having carefully examined them, I felt sure that they were indeed those which I had put on board our ship at Balshora. I then recognized the captain of the vessel, and as I was certain that he believed me to be dead, I went up to him and asked who owned the packages at which I was looking. There was on board my ship, he replied, a merchant of Baghdad named Sinbad. One day he and several of my other passengers landed upon what we supposed to be an island, but which was really an enormous whale floating asleep upon the waves. No sooner did it feel the heat of the fire, which had been kindled up its back, than it plunged into the depths of the sea. Several of the people who were upon it perished in the waves, and among others, who was this unlucky Sinbad. The merchandise is his, but I have resolved to dispose of it for the benefit of his family should I ever chance to meet with them. Captain, I said, I am that Sinbad whom you believe to be dead, and those are my possessions. When the captain heard these words, he cried out in amazement, Lackaday! Oh, lackaday, lackaday! Which is the word coming to? What is lackaday? What is the world coming to? In these days there is not an honest man to be met with. Did I not with my own eyes see Sinbad drown, and now you have the audacity to tell me that you are he? I should have taken you to be a just man, and yet, for the sake of obtaining what does not belong to you, you are ready to invent this horrible falsehood. Have patience and do me the favor of hearing my story, and I speak then. The captain replied to me, I am all attention. So I told him of my escape, of the fortunate meeting of the king's grooms, and how kindly I had been treated in the palace. Very soon I began to see that he that I had made an impression upon him, and after the arrival of some of the other merchandise who showed great joy, merchants who showed great joy at once more seeing me alive, he declared that he also recognized me. Throwing himself upon my neck, he declared, Heaven be praised that you have escaped from such a great danger. As to your goods, I pray you that them and dispose of them at your pleasure. I pray you take them and dispose of them at your pleasure. I thanked him and praised him honestly, begging him to accept several bales of my merchandise in token of my gratitude, but he would take nothing. Of his cheapest of my goods, I prepared a present for King Marid, who was amazing, having known that I had lost all my possessions when I explained how my bales had been miraculously restored to me. He accepted my gift and in return gave me many valuable things. I then took leave of him and exchanged my merchandise for sandals and aloe wood, comar, nutmegs, cloves, pepper, and ginger. I embarked upon the same vessel and traded so successfully during our homeward voyage that I arrived at Belshora with about 100,000 pieces of gold. My brothers and sisters received me with joy. I bought land and slaves and built a great house in which I resolved to live happily, and in the enjoyment of all my pleasures of life, to forget my past sufferings. Here Sinbad paused and commanded the musicians to play again, while the feasting continued until evening. When the time came for the porter to depart, Sinbad gave him a purse containing 100 pieces of gold, saying, Take this, Sinbad, and go home, but tomorrow come again, and you shall hear more of my adventures. The porter returned quite overcome by so much generosity, as you may imagine, that he was well received at home, where his wife and children thanked their lucky stars that he had found such a benefactor as the wealthy Sinbad. The next day, Sinbad, dressed in his best, returning to the Voyage house, and was received with open arms. As soon as the guests had arrived, the banquet began as before, and when they had feasted long and merrily, Sinbad addressed them. My friends, I beg you, will you give me your attention while I relate the adventures of my second voyage, which you will surely find even more astonishing than the first. Karina baby, we are on 779, and tomorrow I will read you the second voyage from Sinbad. His stories are good, right? What a good book. I've never heard that one before. So let's do Lila Tove, and good night to you. Lila Tove, may your dreams come true. We sing Lila Tove, may Israel protect you throughout the night until we reach the morning light. Karina baby, I love you so much, and I miss you so much. You have no idea. I miss you every single second of every single day. I love you, and I miss you, and I can't wait to see you, my baby. Like Papa always used to say, Mama's Papa's sun, Papa's my moon, and you are quite literally our rainbow baby, and we love you. We will always love you. I love you so much. I miss you so much, honey. Good night, honey. I love you.